I am delighted to welcome Dr. Jaishankar and Mr. Blair to India Global Forum. Let's start off with climate change. Many people, including myself, were disappointed. At the recent G7, leaders didn't go far enough, advancing commitments to achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050. It's as if we're at a precipice, looking over, are we going to jump or build a bridge? So let's start, in fact, with Dr. Jaishankar. What do you think is the key to unlocking more rapid progress, and what do you want out of COP26?
First of all, Edie, good to be at the Global Forum. Good to be with you and with Prime Minister Blair. I look forward to the session. When it comes to climate change, let's try and understand how it looks from India's perspective. First of all, I think people need to understand we all get it. There aren't too many climate skeptics in our part of the world. In fact, there are more probably in the developed countries. The issue isn't recognizing the problem. It is today resourcing the solution. The real worry is, if you look at the history of how we've dealt with climate change, we've seen promises year after year, conference after conference. We've seen a continuous inability to live up to those promises. So I don't think today the activity should be to raise awareness and tell people, hey, we got a big problem. I think we all know we have a big problem. The real issue is, do we have the commitment to put in the resources to deal with that? And that's something which particularly the countries who have occupied much of the carbon space have to find answers.
Well, let's talk about that idea around resourcing solutions that you mentioned there. Mr. Blair, what do you think is the key to unlocking more rapid progress that's needed?
And I think the key is to do two things, Edie. And first of all, let me say how delighted I am to be at the India Global Forum and to be alongside Dr. Jaishankar, the Foreign Minister of India. First of all, we need to incentivize the development of the science and technology. The only way that we're going to be able to deal with climate change is if we're able to grow more sustainably. And that means discovering the technologies of the future and making sure the technologies we're already aware of that can cut carbon emissions or eliminate them are accelerated. So we've got to do everything possible that we can to provide the right frameworks within which the development of that science and technology is going to be achieved. And that's everything from aviation fuel to how we do agriculture to, for example, we in the UK will have to replace all the boilers in the house that are the old-fashioned ones and install new ones. There's a whole set of really practical things that need to be done in the development of the science and technology, and we're going to have to do it. But the second thing is to pick up on the point that Dr. Jaishankar was just making. The wealthy part of the world that has essentially created the problem has got then to put in place the resourcing for the developing world as it grows. And as, for example, it gets access to more electricity, to transport links, to be able to do that in a sustainable way. And that is going to be a question of putting together, for example, the financing for big projects of clean energy in continents like Africa, allowing people to do carbon capture and storage and to be able to reduce their carbon emissions as they're going to be growing over these next few years, because if they can't grow, they can't lift their people out of poverty. So it's those two key things that I think have got to be the building blocks of action, and we need to do more on all of them. And COP26 at the end of the year in Scotland, in Glasgow, will be the opportunity for the world to set out a practical plan to get there.
Go ahead, Dr. Jaishankar.
If I can jump in there. Do realize that in large parts of the world, we are actually building for the first time. Okay. I completely agree with what Mr. Blair said, which was Today, technology offers possibilities, even possibilities which were not there the last time we all, let's say, if I were to use Paris as a benchmark, leave alone Kyoto, which is a long time ago. So look at how pervasively solar has spread. Today, I'm right now in Greece. The foreign minister of Greece has just signed Greece's accession to the International Solar Alliance, which was something we, the French, did together. We have worked with UK similarly on disaster resilient infrastructure. So we have technologies, we have solutions. The challenge is to make them available, make them affordable, make them accessible. And if it is, we can't say on the one hand, it's existential, oh my God, it's going to, the world is too horrible to contemplate tomorrow if we don't do something. And then say, oh, by the way, we are back at business. I've got a patents issue, or I've got a financing issue, or I've got a resources issue. Now we got to make up our mind. If it is existential, let's see existential policies.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely correct. Just to give you, one very specific example from the work my institute does in different parts of the world. So we have a big presence on the continent of Africa. Africa's presently got 1.2 billion people. Over the next 30 to 40 years, that is going to grow to over 2 billion people. Around about 30 to 40% have access to electricity at the moment. Electricity is the lifeblood of any country because it gives you access also to the internet and to connectivity. All of these countries in Africa that we're working in want to develop, want to grow, want to get connected to the world. Now, in order to do that, we're going to have to help them, for example, with major projects of clean energy in order to provide the energy in a way that is sustainable. So just to give you two examples, you've got the Inga Dam project, which is potentially the biggest hydroelectric project in the world in the Democratic Republic of Congo. People have talked about it for years, but we've never quite put together the right financing infrastructure for it. We're going to have to find a way to do it. A second project would be in the Sahara Desert, where obviously the potential for solar power is enormous. The African Development Bank has a project for 10 gigawatts of solar power based there, which would allow connectivity in a large part of the northern bit of sub-Saharan Africa. So if you want to deal with climate change, you've got to find practical routes to growth and sustainable growth. And that's why I think it's so important that there's no point, even if the developed world were prepared to cut its consumption, and it's not, frankly, the developing world needs to grow, and growing, it needs access to power and to connectivity. And so the challenge is, how do you make a continent like Africa grow in a sustainable way? Because if you can't, then it's going to be very difficult to reach our climate change objectives.
And do you see that financing is available? The private sector has been a lot talked about the opportunities. Do you see the private sector rising to the challenge?
It can do if the right mechanisms are put in place. Actually, at the moment, because interest rates have been historically very low, there's a lot of capital. The world's not short of liquidity right now. There's a lot of capital, but it needs to be put together in a structured way. It needs cooperation between development agencies and some of the guarantors of financing. And then you need to be able to, develop a coherent and proper plan for building the transmission lines, the grid, and of course the actual elements of power production. But it's not impossible to do it. And I think the more we get practical, the better this is going to be, because, and I'm sure Jay will say this in relation to India, India is going to carry on growing. By the middle of this century, India, China, and America will be the three largest economies in the world. That's for sure. They'll be the giants. So if we want India to grow sustainably, we've got to be there as a partner in helping it do so.
Dr. Jaishankar, can you speak to that idea around financing and projects that you'd like to see help India grow?
No, absolutely. I completely agree with what Tony is saying. And I want to add here that actually, India, on its part, has been pushing a lot of the green energy projects. One in India itself. I mean, today we have one of the largest solar programs in the world, and we've also been using, both bilateral partnership programs and International Solar Alliance to push green electricity generation, especially in Africa. But I think resources is one. We have seen. Look back. We financed development using soft loans. By skewing lending, we could actually take the world in a certain direction. So if we did more green lending, it is exactly what Tony said. Practically, the world will be moving in that direction. But that also means governmental policies. It means change of public mindsets. Look, you still have, for example, a lot of opposition to big hydel projects. You have opposition to nuclear projects. And I understand why. I mean, there have been past experiences. There are collateral challenges with all of that. But the fact is, today we have to look at a lot of these issues with clearer eyes, if you would, with fresher eyes, and understand that until we do big hydel, unless we do more nuclear, and again, it's not just an energy issue. Water is a big issue. Agriculture is a big issue. I mean, when we say sustainability, it's not just about generating power or polluting the atmosphere. Now, we've seen, for example, in India, that as we moved, done some long needed reforms on more sustainable agriculture, that's also had its own challenges. So it's certainly an issue for the government. It's an issue for the private sector. It's an issue for the technology sector. It's an issue for civil society.
Let's move on to COVID-19. So I'd like to discuss how important public health has become. So I wonder, Mr. Blair, is it now a major geopolitical issue, strategic issue, to be viewed in with the same kind of lenses as terror or climate?
Yes, I think it is a major geopolitical issue now, and certainly it is very similar to security, if you like. There's two dimensions. The first is we're still dealing with COVID. As we've seen, there are still new variants arising. Most recently in India, but we had the variants in the UK and in Brazil and South Africa, and we're likely to get new variants. So we're not out of the woods on COVID at all. We may have to adapt vaccines. We've got to carry on with vaccine production. We've got to coordinate that vaccine production so that we're creating enough vaccines I would like to see at least the most vulnerable, the frontline health workers, the main urban populations of the world vaccinated this year, and then the job completed next year, 2022. So we've still got a lot of work to do on this pandemic. But then I think there's a whole set of questions which we have learned as a result of the COVID experience, which means that we're going to have to create an infrastructure, global infrastructure of pandemic preparedness around things like genomic surveillance, how we shorten the period of time between identifying a virus, developing the vaccines, producing them and distributing them. I mean, the ambition is to pull down what has been essentially a 15-month process into more like a 3-month process. That requires a lot of organization, a lot of cooperation in the world. But no, I think we're in a new era, and we need to create a new architecture to deal with it.
So, Dr. Jaishankar, let's bring you into that as well. Can you tell me how important you see public health as a geopolitical strategic issue?
Well, very important, and that's like an understatement. But I just want to step back a bit here. One of the paradoxes of our era is the real problems are all global. Climate change is global. Terrorism is global. Pandemics are global. But our responses tend to be national. just look back at the last year and a half. Which country has not thought nationally? And unless we, are able to overcome that and look at international coordination, cooperation, call it collaborate, put any word you want to on it, we're not going to be able to get on top of this problem. And why I would, in the interstate priorities for me, this would come very high, is I can't think of any happening in my lifetime, I'm not exactly a young person, which has had this kind of ripple impact on everything in life. I mean, just think back, our lives have come, in a sense, to a halt. People lost jobs, there were large sectors of the economy in different societies that melted. People lost lives on a huge scale. The stresses on people, the change in work style, lifestyle. I mean, it's huge, and it's still continuing. So we need to get on top of it, no question. I think it's the burning issue right now, but it will not happen unless enough capabilities which are spread around the world, and vaccines is a very good example, because the reality is nobody can make vaccines by themselves. The world has to come together if we're going to scale up vaccines. And unless we do that, and we'll have to look beyond vaccines as well. I mean, there will be other challenges and what would come with it. Now, here's the good news. When we've seen, we are still in the middle of a very serious second national wave. At one level, it's been obviously a sort of scarring experience. The virulence was so great. But on the other hand, we did see the world kind of rally around and say, okay, look, what is it we can do for you? Now, that may not have solved the problem, but at least now, I would say compared to last year, one evolution I see, 2021, there's the beginnings of a willingness in the world to work together on this problem. Maybe I'm being a bit optimistic. Maybe foreign ministers like to believe there are solutions, the global solutions to all problems. So it's an occupational thing. But I would certainly hope that we see this year and onwards much more international collaboration on the responses to this.
I'd love to pick up on that point of nationalism, Mr. Blair, because in fact, the last time I interviewed you was 5 months before the Brexit vote. And you warned me very clearly that there was a very real chance that nationalism was going to rise up in the UK. How do you take that concept of nationalism versus the global response that we need to make everyone safe?
And it's a really good question. And I think that the way of dealing with it is to present global cooperation as enlightened self-interest, because that's what it is in the end. I mean, the truth of the matter is, look, if you're running a government, I was prime minister for 10 years, your first job is to help your people, and so countries looking after their own people first. That is natural. Any group of politicians, certainly those standing for election, are going to do that. But what the pandemic has taught us, of course, is the limitations of that. Because we're all at risk if the pandemic is circulating in a different part of the world and they don't have vaccines and they don't have the ability to control the disease. So in the end, the reason why it's important to get the world vaccinated is not as a humanitarian gesture, though that's important. It is in the end in our own interest, because if we don't, we will get fresh variants, and some of those variants may escape and circumvent the vaccines we have in existence already. If I can just come back to the point, though, that Jay was making, which I think is very important and needs underlining. I think the G20 this year will be a very big moment for pandemic preparedness. And if you think back and you look at all the shortcomings, I mean, yes, we have done a certain amount of global cooperation. But if you think, for example, how long it has taken us to develop, and we're still not fully there yet, rapid antigen tests at the point of care, which are much cheaper than PCR tests, because you can't do PCR tests at scale. And yet mass testing is obviously going to be part of it. If you think of how absurd it is in a way that for the 10 or 12 or 14 vaccines that are going to be the ones that the world uses, and we know what they are. By the way, we know what they are for a year or more. Different regulatory authorities having different standards and tests, and it should be possible to coordinate that in a much, much better way. Vaccine production, if you think about it, a year ago, we should have been working out as the main countries in the world, who's producing vaccine, not necessarily COVID vaccine. How do we repurpose those plants, those bioreactors, in order to be producing vaccine for COVID? Because the truth is, in the last 6 months, the world's been scrabbling for vaccine, right? It's been trying to, I'm talking to governments the whole time, and they're trying to beg, borrow, and steal wherever they can the vaccine, and this is a global failure. Now, the reason why it's so important to put all this in place is that, in one sense, we have been lucky with this pandemic, with COVID-19, and we've been lucky in this sense that it's been obvious over the past few years that this concept of sort of pathogens and turning into pandemics is going to be a feature of the modern world. And with this particular virus, it has been highly contagious, but even if its mortality rate is 1-2%, which is a lot, and of course there's terrible, every death has been a tragedy during the course of this, think if the lethality rate were 10% or 15%. So we really can't afford to be in this position again, where it takes us, well, we're 18 months into this effectively, and we're still not on top of it. So this is why, if we're smart about it, at the end of this year, on November, when the G20 happens under Italy's chairmanship, I think it's going to be really, really important that we take some big decisions around global cooperation that allow us to shorten the time between a pandemic developing and curtailing it.
I mean, this issue of, I'll take my home country, the United States, where we are hoarding vaccines. Vaccines are being given to 12-year-olds. So I say a lot of the time, I don't think that this is fair. That vaccine inequality, as you said, Mr. Blair, means that we should be protecting the most vulnerable and the frontline healthcare workers around the world before we look at those 12-year-olds. Yet, as the mother of 3 kids who schools one by one, their classes start to close and those kids come home, I get it. I see why you want to vaccinate kids as well. So how do you deal with that if you can't scale up this manufacturing fast enough?
Yeah, no, look, it's difficult. But I mean, one of the things I try and do now that I'm not in office anymore is not advocate things that I know if I was in office, I wouldn't be doing. And, inevitably, if you're the president or prime minister of a country, you're going to be looking after your people first. But to take the case of America, I mean, what the US can do, and to be fair, President Biden's said they will do, is they're going to produce a whole lot more of vaccine, so that past the satiation rate of the United States, they're then going to be producing vaccine, probably half a billion more Pfizer vaccine. I think Moderna is going to produce 1 billion more than it anticipated for next year. And we've just got to get it out as swiftly as possible. By the way, there's one other thing, which is that in many of the countries we work in, the problem is not just getting vaccine, it's being able to put together an effective rollout of the vaccine and actually absorbing the vaccine that people have. And I think that is very important. I think the other thing is there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy still around. And one of the things that I think is really important, and again, would benefit from coordination, is to publish the data on vaccine effectiveness in a way that is publicly persuasive. So, for example, if you take the UK, I mean, we are one of the few countries that has done at scale both Pfizer, which is a messenger RNA vaccine, and AstraZeneca, which is the more traditional adenovirus vaccine. And I think if we put that data out in the right way, it would be highly persuasive for people in showing that vaccines are very effective. They cut your prospect of getting the disease, they cut your prospect of transmitting it, and they cut radically the prospect of hospitalization or death. And I think one of the things we're going to find as we carry on with these vaccination programs is that you get to quite a hard core of people who are extremely hesitant to take the vaccines. And yet we need that. If the virus becomes more transmissible, and the Delta variant is more transmissible, much more, then you're going to need a higher level of vaccination in order to get immunity amongst the population.
This is a conversation between friends, so it's always good to give advice, whether it's wanted or not. So, Mr. Blair, India has a great connection to both the West and Africa, and quite uniquely so. So in this context, and wanting to see India taking a step up in leadership more generally, what would you encourage India to do more of?
Well, it's probably one thing I've learned since leaving office is that it's easier to give the advice than take the decision. No, I think what India is doing, in fact, because of the way the Serum Institute in India is going to be producing a large amount of vaccine, is that hopefully once the situation in India settles down, that Serum Institute plant, which will be producing, I think, AstraZeneca, but also the Novavax vaccine, which is also going to be a very important vaccine, they can then start helping the rest of the world. And I think also India teach a lot of the developing part of the world how to do a rollout of vaccine adoption at scale, because this, as I say, is very difficult. I mean, a lot of countries are used to doing vaccination programs amongst children, but to do a vaccine program at this scale amongst the whole of the adult population, I think is a big challenge. One other thing I'd log as a really important issue out of this, and that's the importance of collecting data and the importance of again, I think if there were common standards around verifying and credentialing vaccinations, this would also be extremely important. I do think that when we get international travel going again, we are going to find that countries are going to be asking for proof of vaccination status. And I think this is going to be a very, very important part of getting the world moving.
If we move to or come back to this idea of multilateralism, Dr. Jaishankar, but beyond its long-standing demand for a seat on the UN Security Council, what else do you seek, is India seeking in terms of reform of multilateral institutions? I do a lot of work with the WHO. There's been a lot of criticism. There's a lot of call to reform organizations like the WHO. What do you think the future of global governance looks like?
Idik, for a moment, can I just go back a minute to the last point? And I say this because I just actually came out last week from a visit to an African country. I was in Kenya and Nairobi. And during this period, I've spoken actually to a large number of my African counterparts. Look, health, and in a way, I'm answering the question you asked me now about multilateralism as well. What this pandemic has done is it has taken health right up the priority list. Okay. So today, whether it's Africa, whether any other part of the world, but I hear this especially in Africa, is work with us on strengthening the health infrastructure. Okay. The second, which was a direct result of the pandemic, is it has accelerated the digital side of our lives. I mean, almost everybody is doing some variant of what we've done in India, which was, when you did contact tracing, we used a phone app. When you wanted to get yourself registered for vaccination, we used a website or an app out there. When you got registered, you got your vaccination certificate, which I carry around in my phone to show to immigration in different parts of the world. So health has gone up the chain. The power of digital is today much more recognized. We spoke earlier about climate change, so I think everybody wants to be greener. So the fact is there is today a new global agenda in the making. The new global agenda is much greener, it's more health conscious, much more digital. It looks at a lot of other insecurities which were magnified by the pandemic, food, for example, sustainable agriculture. So the question is, not just do we reform the UN, does, a country like India, to be the fifth largest economy and the second largest country and not be in the Security Council. Yes, all of that is there. I accept that. But I think there's a bigger issue, which is, is multilateralism living up to the new global challenges and the new global agenda? And I would put it to you that unless we make it more contemporary, I would ask yourself, what is it you are using, which is 75 years old? Anything in your personal life, look around you. Other than relatives. So what 75 is a long time. It needs a refresh. It needs an update. We need a new agenda, a new system, a new process out there. And we can't have people who benefited at one point in history from a certain set of circumstances, kind of freeze it and say, well, that's how the world's going to be forever.
My house is, in fact, over 75 years old, so I'm gonna hold on to that one. But what does that look like, Mr. Blair? What do you think we could see in terms of a reform or a fresh look at multilateralism?
I mean, let me be absolutely frank here. So, what Jay says about the UN Security Council, for example, is absolutely correct. But here's what I found when I was in office, and for a time was trying to push an agenda of reform. It's very hard to get agreement on it because the countries that have positions don't want to give it up, like Britain, for example, and yet you can't really justify a situation in which India is not a permanent member of the Security Council. But if you bring in India and you accept Britain stays, then what about Japan and what about Germany? And so anyway, my point is really this. I think we will do better, at least around this health question, if we focus on the practical things. And that means I think we do need to strengthen the WHO architecture, but we do need to work out, and probably the G20 is the most, it brings together the largest economies of the world, and it's not so Western focused as the G7. My suggestion would be you just segment the things that you need to get done. Like, for example, if you just take this issue of genomic surveillance, to be able to build a network of genomic surveillance that will use probably cloud analytics in order to be able to analyze the data fast and come to conclusions fast about what is happening. You might be better just to look at how you strengthen that part. Where you slot it into the global architecture, you can have a debate about that, but just the practical question around that. And I mean, I think that, for example, getting the major pharma companies together and working out how in any pandemic that arises in the future, you're going to be able to maximize your capability to produce vaccine at speed. So I think we'll do better if we end up with really practical solutions to these issues. And I just want to emphasize one thing that Jay said. I mean, I do think that it's not just about the pandemic per se and dealing with COVID. There has been a massive focus for all countries now on their healthcare systems and particularly the place of technology within those healthcare systems. And again, I think if I was back in government today and was looking at, for example, the development arm of the UK, I would be taking a quite different lens to look at how we would help countries to develop their healthcare systems, build things like electronic health records, allow you to do remote consultations for doctors and consultants. And I think there's a whole set of very practical things that we could sit down and get done. And probably that is a better idea to concentrate upon than trying, for example, to reform the UN Security Council, even though I completely agree it needs to be reformed. But having gone around that course a few times, I came to the conclusion that it led pretty much nowhere. So I completely agree, 75 years old, things definitely need changing, but maybe the best way to make the change is to do it on a somewhat more ad hoc basis, looking at the particular issues we need to tackle.
Dr. Jaishankar,
just a quick comment there. You know, we started, in fact, just before the COVID-19, a digital health and a digital education initiative in Africa. I think we've got about 15 countries we are working with on that. So since I'm still in the government, I'm doing exactly what Tony is suggesting here, which is getting our development partnerships to relook at what is it, how are we most effective? And I would say today, for me, a shift to being more digital and more green and obviously more health conscious. And by the way, the three kind of go together as well. So I'm completely with him on this. I'm, by the way, completely not with him on the on the Security Council. I think we just need to, we need to persevere out here. So Rome wasn't built in a day. So I think that's something you're going to see us continue.
And I'm going to wish you good luck with this, Jay.
Maybe just one final topic before we close. You've both talked about technology and the power to harness technology and digital to make the world more equitable, with more empowered, healthier, better educated citizens. So that also comes with some caveats, right? Because you're working with technology companies, many of whom have been seen to be challenging democracy. So I wonder if you could both speak a little bit to how you view this idea of big technology within the experience that you've both had, Mr. Blair.
Yeah, well, these big tech companies are vast behemoths with enormous power. I mean, of course, consumers are using them. We should never forget this. I mean, they have customers because people like their product. But a lot of them are what I would call almost public interest companies today. So if you take the major tech giants, their impact on our lives and on the economy is so enormous that my institute published a paper last year, actually, talking about how you need a regulatory framework within which they operate. And I think there's just no gainsaying that. Now, at the same time, I think it's important that we don't focus the whole tech debate on big tech. There are enormous innovations going on in technology the whole time. I think the 21st century technology revolution is the equivalent of the 19th century industrial revolution. It's going to change everything. And a lot of it is extremely exciting and full of possibility. And if you look, and no doubt Jay can speak to this better than me, obviously, but if you look at a country like India, it is becoming a center of technology innovation that's immensely exciting. So I think, yes, we do need to look at the big tech and how they operate, but I think we should bear in mind that technology as a whole has immense capabilities to liberate and to advance humankind. I think one big issue, though, will be the digital divide and the fact that lots of millions and hundreds of millions of people don't actually have access to technology today, so we need to deal with that. And I think one other thing which we should bear in mind is that you are going to have competing centers of technology innovation today, not least with China. And the power of China in the technology sphere is something we need to be focused on and make sure that we stay fully competitive, not just in the West, but also in the East as well, given that China is going to be such a major player in this space in the 21st century.
Dr. Jaishankar, how do you view this question?
Well, there's actually right now, I would say, a big debate on big tech going on in different parts of the world, including a very vigorous one in India. There's the larger issue, which I think Tony flagged, which is there's technology, there's innovation. I think nobody denies these are forces of progress which are taking us in directions which obviously are of great benefit and opening up new vistas which we couldn't have imagined. So I'm sort of laying out the challenge in a way as a very pro-technology person, someone who's seen some of its potential. But in a democratic society, we have to ask ourselves, okay, big tech is there. It's in my life, very, very visibly in my life. So you have a big presence. Where's the responsibility which comes with that? Okay, they have huge power. Where's the accountability? This is again not an issue limited to India. They harvest our data as they do across the world. So you have, in a sense, the opposite of the American Revolution, which is you have representation and no taxation. I think these are issues because today what big tech has done, and one part is looking at it as a governance issue, as a political issue, as a democratic issue, I would say. The other is to look at it also, the influence that they command. International relations has been devised on the basis of state-based players. What happens when you have non-state players who in some ways are bigger than many, many states? So these are very serious questions which need debating. I think they can't be brushed under the carpet saying, well, you shouldn't question them because then you're attacking freedom of speech. I think that's a cop-out. It obviously serves their interest. So it's a very, very legitimate debate.
I think we're out of time. So I would just like to thank you both very much for joining us at India Global Forum, Mr. Blair and Dr. Jaishankar, and thank you so much.